Welcome to Building AI-Powered Chatbots Without Programming. My name is Antonio Cangiano, and I'm a software developer and AI evangelist at IBM. When we talk about AI, people start thinking about science fiction scenarios. That might excite you or maybe scare you, but one thing is certain. We're many years away from so-called strong AI, in which a machine becomes as intelligent as a human being. Well, some humans. What we're not far away is artificial intelligence that serves practical purposes and can fundamentally change the way we experience everyday life. In this course, we're going to focus on one of the most popular applications of AI available today, namely chatbots, which are one example of conversational AI. Chatbots are exploding in popularity, so much so that Gartner predicts that by next year, a quarter of all customer service operations will use chatbots to assist their customers. This presents a great opportunity for individuals and companies who have the skills to build, say, chatbots. That's my goal for this course, to teach you how to build customer service chatbots. AI is getting smarter and more readily available. As such, I will be able to teach you how to create chatbots without the need to write any single line of code. We'll start off by introducing chatbots and discuss what they are, as well as why they are becoming so popular. Next, in Module 2 and 3, we'll introduce intents and entities, which are two key components of any chatbot. In Module 4, we'll tackle the dialogue itself, including chatbot design considerations and best practices. In Module 5, we'll deploy the chatbot to an actual website that will be generated for you. This means that anyone with a link to your site can try out your chatbot. Finally, in Modules 6 and 7, we'll consider more advanced topics that can really help you polish the user experience and create more advanced chatbots. Note that this is a hands-on course, so when I say that we'll tackle such topics, I do really mean it. I'll give you the theoretical background required to understand what's going on, while you spend most of your time working on labs designed to help you experience the actual process of creating chatbots. Each module has a series of graded quizzes that count towards your final score. Likewise, there's an exam at the end to ensure that you fully grasp the concept presented within the course. I believe you will find the process of creating chatbots with Watson to be intuitive and fun once you get the hang of it. I hope you enjoy this course and that it will help you break into a career in AI.
Build chatbots. My name is Antonio Cangiano, and I'm a software developer and artificial intelligence evangelist at IBM. Over 50,000 people took the first edition of this course on chatbot building, and the reviews have been amazing so far. This motivated me to create an even better version of the course that uses the latest user interface and incorporates some exciting new features that weren't available when the first edition of the course came out in 2017. In this course, I'll teach you all that you realistically need to know about chatbots, the business opportunity they provide, and how to start building useful chatbots for yourself, your company, or your clients. No coding skills are required, so anyone can take this course and learn how to create and deploy chatbots. Together we'll build a chatbot for a fictitious florist chain of stores, the chatbot that provides information and assistance to prospective customers. We'll then deploy it on a WordPress site. Don't worry if you don't have your own WordPress site, as one will be provided for you in the course. All right, let's find out what chatbots are and how they can help us by discussing a common scenario. Your call is important to us. Due to unusually high call volume, you may experience a greater hold time than usual. Many of us are going to be familiar with this greeting on the phone when trying to reach the customer support line of a company. The prompt varies, but the gist of it is always the same. It would seem that the call volume is always unusually high, no matter when we call. Another common prompt you might be familiar with is, "Your call may be recorded for quality and training purposes." I must confess that at times I question how much these conversations are actually being used for training purposes as opposed to liability purposes. As we'll see in this course, with chatbots, we can actually use the conversations with customers to train and make our chatbot smarter and more useful. At any rate, we are on the line waiting for what seems to be an eternity, and we finally get to talk to a person. And they tell us, "Have you tried turning it off and on again?" Now, this is frustrating regardless of whether it fixes our problem. If it doesn't, we feel insulted by such a simple suggestion after 20 minutes of patiently waiting on the line. And if it fixes our problem, as it often actually does, we'll be happier but still frustrated from having wasted so much time on something we should have thought of ourselves or found as a suggestion on the company website. I'm not picking on companies providing customer care here. The truth is that customer support is hard. It's not hard because the questions are very hard. In most cases, it's a matter of providing simple answers to simple questions. It's hard because customer care, powered by humans, is not very scalable. If your business is doing well, you'll have an increasingly large amount of customers who need your help. So you'll need to hire more and more people, and that takes money. You'll also need to spend the time and energy to train them properly, managing them, and so on. Chatbots are not meant to replace humans entirely, but they can help us address a large number of simple inquiries from our customers. They can scale indefinitely, unlike human teams, and are available 24/7 every day of the year. In other words, they can act as a first line of defense for your customer care team, allowing you to inexpensively scale your customer support operations and provide a better service by having immediate answers around the clock for common inquiries. For example, a hotel might drastically cut down on the number of calls its reception desk receives simply by having a chat box that replies to the most common inquiries, such as restaurant hours or checkout times, setting an alarm call, or figuring out how to connect to the Wi-Fi. This leaves the hotel staff with a greater degree of time and energy to tackle more elaborate requests, such as changing rooms because one of their customers found crickets in their room. That actually happened to me, but that's a story for another day. We had this customer care scaling problem ourselves when cognitive class started to become more popular. We were ecstatic to have 1 million enrolled learners, but that posed a serious problem for our small team. So we created a student advisor chatbot that could advise students on which course to take and other common questions. As simple as it is, it reduced the number of support tickets from our students to about half of the number we were getting prior to the introduction of our chatbot. And unlike our team, who has a habit of going to sleep most nights, the chatbot is there, available 24/7 for our users. That's our story. Here is another one. Alan from Dollar Tea Club, a subscription service for tea lovers, is a one-man shop. He has to do everything by himself. Prior to introducing a chatbot, he was spending a lot of his time answering the same questions over and over. Do you ship to Canada? How much is shipping? How does it work? What kind of teas do you have? And so on. Again, simple questions that still take time to answer if a human is on the receiving end. So he took the first version of this chatbot course and built a chatbot that is saving him many hours a week. According to Alan, the moment the chatbot went live, it was like turning off a switch in terms of support tickets received. The chatbot he created is allowing him to regain some of his time, which he can use to actually grow his business. It's worth noting that Alan is a businessman, not a programmer, but he was able to create his own chatbot by the end of this course. So will you. Another example I wanted to give you is Oscar, the chatbot from the airline company Air New Zealand. I recently visited their wonderful country, and on my way there, I had a question about protein powder. You know how import regulations can be quite strict, so I got a little paranoid that I might be breaking some rules. Not wanting to be the Pablo Escobar of whey protein isolate, I asked the staff on board, and they had no idea. Thankfully, I had Wi-Fi on the plane and was able to use their chatbot, which had an answer to my protein powder question and all other questions I had. I was really impressed by how useful it was, especially at 35,000 feet in the air. As you can see, chatbots are universally useful, regardless of whether you're a one-person operation or a Fortune 500 company. Throughout this course, we'll learn how to create chatbots that serve practical business purposes rather than just being amusing gimmicks. But first, what is a chatbot? It's a software agent capable of conversing with users through some kind of chat interface. Typically, the chatbot will greet the user and invite them to take some action, like asking it a question. When the user replies, the chatbot will parse the input and figure out the intention of the user's question. Finally, it will respond in a consequential manner, either providing information or asking for further details before ultimately answering the question. Great chatbots can keep up this back and forth in a natural way within the scope of what the chatbot is designed to do. They make the user feel understood and helped. They create a rapport with the user without pretending to be human. The most common chatbots are textual chatbots, the kind you'd interact with in a chat pop-up window on a website or through a messaging app like Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, or Slack. However, you can interact with some chatbots through your voice. Apple Siri and Amazon Alexa are two examples of audio-based virtual assistants. Before we proceed further, it's worth noting that sometimes you might hear the word bot instead of chatbot in this course or elsewhere online. Depending on the context, it's acceptable to use bot in lieu of chatbot to mean the same thing. Nevertheless, the term bot is more generic, and there are software programs that independently perform a certain operation on our behalf without being chatbots. For example, a trader bot might monitor the market for certain conditions and then perform automated stock trading transactions based on that information. That's not a chatbot, as no chatting is taking place. The conversational element is what makes a bot a chatbot. There are many other terms that refer to chatbots, such as chatterbot, chatterbox, talkbot, virtual assistant, conversational agent, embodied agent, and even artificial conversational entity, or its acronym ACE. And believe it or not, this list is not even exhaustive. I like to keep things simple though, so I will generally stick with chatbot and occasionally bot in this course. Chatbots are trending. In this video, we'll discuss why and give you your first assignment. Chatbots are really trending. Everybody seems to be talking about them, and every day there is a new headline about how they are going to be big. If you cut through the hype, you'll notice that there is a genuine interest, and businesses, small and big, are paying very close attention to them. This creates a great business opportunities for those with the right skills. Chatbots have been around since the late 60s. The first chatbot, Eliza, was rudimentary, but it proved the potential of chatbots even back then. So why are chatbots suddenly so in demand now over half a century later? Two key developments have allowed chatbots to become a viable business tool and such an in-demand skill. The first one is the emergence of messenger applications. WhatsApp, WeChat, Facebook Messenger, and even Slack have become incredibly popular. Collectively, they are used by billions of people around the world. That's B, not M. In fact, messenger platforms are even more popular than social media sites. Messenger apps might have been the catalyst for the emergence of chatbots, but they are certainly not the only platform. Chatbots are now appearing on sites and as mobile apps as well. It's not so much the platform on which they are delivered on, but rather the conversational nature of the interface. People simply love textual chat and prefer it over virtually every other form of digital conversation. The second key component that allowed chatbots to really take off is the emergence of artificial intelligence. Chatbots wouldn't be very useful if they weren't able to understand what the user wants and respond accordingly. Over the past few years, machine learning, deep learning, natural language processing, and artificial intelligence in general have all progressed quite rapidly. You might be familiar with IBM Watson, who, several years ago, defeated the best Jeopardy players in the world. More recently, IBM showcased Project Debater, an AI capable of debating humans on complex topics. The math behind many of these innovations and achievements is quite complex, and by the end of this course, you will fully understand these formulas. Well, not really. You see, AI is becoming smarter, but it's also becoming more readily available to everyone. AI is no longer accessible solely to researchers with PhDs in computer science. Such cognitive capabilities are now easily available via libraries and through services provided by companies like IBM. Today, the many AI capabilities of Watson are readily provided as services and APIs that are available to anyone with an IBM cloud account. In this course, we'll in fact use one such a service. Specifically, I'm talking about Watson Assistant. This will enable us to develop a chatbot with NLP, or natural language processing capabilities. In other words, a chatbot that understands our users and can provide useful answers within the scope we define for it. It's now your turn. In the next section of this module, you'll find a lab that will instruct you to register for a free IBM cloud account and to create a Watson Assistant service. Follow the step-by-step instructions I provided, and the process should not take much time or effort. Of how to build chatbots. In this module, we'll discuss one of the three components of a chatbot, namely intents. Conceptually, this is how a chatbot works. The user enters some text, the chatbot thinks really hard, and then a response is issued to the user. Now that's very, very high level and doesn't tell us much, of course. So let's see more in detail how this works. The chatbot will use three main components to determine how to interpret the user input and how to respond to it. Intents, the subject of this module, entities, which we'll cover in the next module, and finally the dialogue, which we'll cover in Module 4. When you create a chatbot in Watson Assistant, the first thing you do is create a dialogue skill, which will contain these three components. Intents are the most important component because they try to determine what the user wants. What are they asking for? In other words, they capture the intent or goal of the user. For example, we could define a greetings intent and train Watson with some examples of what a greeting looks like. We might provide hello, hey, hi, good morning, and for our friends from New Zealand, kia ora. It's a good practice to provide at least 5 examples per intent in order to fully train Watson on the intent. But the more the merrier applies here. Once Watson is trained on the intents we defined, it will look at the user input and try to determine if any of the intents match the user request. For example, if the user were to say aloha, Watson would recognize that it's a greeting akin to the ones we've trained it on. Note that aloha was not one of the examples we gave it. This is where Watson's artificial intelligence capabilities really kick in. We train it with some examples, and Watson will be able to recognize an intent in the user utterance, even when the user phrases it very differently from the examples we provided. As mentioned in the previous module, in this course we'll create a simple chatbot for a fictitious chain of flower shops. So let's consider for a moment a domain-specific intent, as opposed to simple chit-chat intents. Users may want to find out about our hours of operation, so we could define an hours info intent. Note, however, that intents cannot have spaces, so we'll simply use an underscore instead of a space. And here are some examples that we might provide to train Watson on the hours info intent. What time are you open until? What are your hours of operation? Are you open on Saturdays? And so on. These are all realistic ways in which users might express the same request for hours of operation information. It's important to train Watson with realistic examples to the point that you'll even want to leave in typos you might accidentally make as you type out the examples. After all, if you made that typo, your users might as well. Now, when the user asks, "When is your Toronto store open?" Watson will recognize our hours info intent, even though, again, this particular phrasing was not part of our examples. Watson was smart enough to figure out what the user wanted now that it understands what hours info represents. Intent examples can be entered manually in Watson Assistant, but they can also be imported from CSV files. This simplifies collaboration. For instance, you could receive the examples from a colleague in your customer care team who doesn't know anything about building chatbots. To help you out, Watson Assistant also comes with a content catalog, which provides collections of intents relevant to various industries such as banking, insurance, and e-commerce. It's not a pre-made chatbot by any means, but you can use it as a starting point to build upon. It's worth noting that in this course we'll build our chatbot in English, but several other languages are available as well. So if you wish to create a chatbot in Italian or Japanese, you'll simply create a dialogue skill in that language and then train Watson with relevant examples in the same language. That's it for the theory around intents. In the rest of the module, you'll go through the labs that will guide you through the process of creating, importing, and testing intents. Welcome to the third module of how to build chatbots. In the previous module, we mastered intents. This module is entirely dedicated to entities, the second key component of our dialogue skill. As you know by now, intents capture the user goal. Entities allow us to capture specific values within the user utterance. You might recall this example from the previous module. you'll notice how the chatbot is correctly detecting the intent, but completely ignoring the specifics of the question. In other words, when is your Toronto store open and when is your Vancouver store open are the same as far as our chatbot is concerned. That's because we haven't defined an entity to capture that specific bit of information, namely the location of the store. So what we could do is create a location entity. Notice how we use an @ symbol rather than a pound symbol for entities. We can then define multiple values for our entity, such as Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, etc. One value for each store location that we have. You'll notice that we can also define synonyms for a given entity value. These can be dictionary synonyms, but are often synonyms in the sense that the user might refer to the entity value in that way. Imagine, for example, our Toronto store is located on Warden Avenue. People might ask about hours of operation of our Toronto store, or they might phrase it as, "What are the hours of operation of your Warden Avenue store?" Either should lead our chatbot to detect the same entity value. Synonyms are optional, but are a useful feature and worth defining when applicable. With our location entity defined, we can now detect the intent and the specific location. With these two pieces of information, we can provide an appropriate and specific answer to the user. Note that although entities' values can have spaces in them, we need a special syntax to represent them. If the entity value has a space in it, we simply wrap it in parentheses to refer to it when, later on, we'll define the rules of our dialog. Much like intents, we can also import entities from CSV. In fact, in the labs for this module, you will import them in this way and learn how to export them to CSV as well. Other than entering them manually in Watson Assistant and importing them from CSV, there is also a third way to add entities to your chatbot. In fact, there are some predefined system entities that you can enable if needed by your chatbot. As you can see, there are quite a few options. Syscurrency allows us to detect mentions of currencies within the user input. Sysdate mentions of dates. For example, the user might reply to a question with "next Monday," and sysdate will allow us to capture that piece of information as an actual specific date. Sysperson allows us to detect common names, an easy way to collect people's names to make your chatbot more personal, as you'll see later on in the course. System entities are quite handy, and they are constantly being improved upon. Make sure you check the system entities available in your dialog skill before you jump right to implementing your own entities. All right, now it's your turn. By now, you should know the drill. In the rest of this module, you'll find a series of guided exercises that will teach you how to work with entities. You'll also find some graded quizzes. In the next module, we'll see how to put the intents and entities we defined to good use to provide accurate and specific responses to the user. To the fourth module of how to build chatbots. In this module, we'll finally address the third component of our dialogue skill, namely the dialogue itself. The dialogue component allows us to issue a response to the user based on the basis of their intent and the specifics of their request, which we captured through entities we defined. It's great that our chatbot can detect and classify the user input. However, so far, we haven't really replied to the user at all. We must be able to act on that correct classification by issuing an appropriate response. When a user greets us, for example, we may want to reply back with, "Hi there, how can I help you?" The same is true for more complex queries. We must be able to use the fine-tuned classification that intents and entities enable us to do to provide an appropriate and accurate response to the user. In this case, they inquired about our Toronto store hours, and the response would reflect that and contain the information the user is looking for. A dialog is simply a tree of nodes, and each node will typically handle one particular scenario. For example, here we have 3 nodes. The first one is welcome, which handles the chatbot prompt. In other words, our greeting when the first user arrives. Then we have a greetings node to respond to the user greeting us. And finally, we have a special fallback node that will notify the user that the chatbot wasn't quite sure about what the user was asking. Welcome and anything else are two default nodes created for you when you first create the dialog for your chatbot. Any node you'll define will sit in between these two. But let's take a quick look at what a node might look like. You'll want to give each node a name. Watson doesn't really care about the node name, but it's useful to us, the chatbot designers, so that we can more easily organize and work with our nodes. Next, we'll have a condition that determines when the node should be executed. In this case, the node will be executed if the greetings intent is detected in the user input. The condition can be as simple as this or complex logical expression. In most cases, it will test against an intent, entity, or a combination of them. Then we have the response block, where we finally get to decide what to reply back to the user. In this case, a simple, "Hi there, how can I help you?" will suffice. This response block has many options. In fact, the response doesn't even have to be text. It could be an image or some options for the user to choose from. We can provide multiple response variations and then decide if they should be issued in the order they appear every time this node is executed or randomly from the list we provide. We can even have multiple responses where we attach a condition to each individual response within the same node. This is a great feature, and we'll definitely take advantage of it in the labs of this course. Finally, we get to specify what happens after we issued a response. Typically, we just wait for the user to say something else, and that's why that's the default action. However, other options are available, including the ability to jump to other nodes within the dialog. This is a feature that will be useful in more complex chatbots, but can lead to chatbots that are difficult to reason about if you abuse it. The execution is evaluated from the top to the bottom of the dialog. So when the user submits their utterance, the first node will be evaluated for execution. If the condition is not met, we'll move down to the second node. If this one doesn't meet the criteria either, we'll consider the third node, and so on. Essentially, we continue to evaluate nodes in the order they appear while the conditions of these nodes are false. We stop at the first node whose condition matches the user input. This is why it's important to have that anything else fallback node at the very bottom. That node has a special condition that is always true whenever all the nodes above it failed to execute. It ensures that we have a reply for the user, even if it's a simple, "I don't understand, could you try rephrasing?" Likewise, this is why we have the welcome node greeting the user at the very top. That node has a special welcome condition that is only true at the beginning of the conversation with the user. By placing it up top, we ensure that it's executed prior to any other node being considered. The fact that the condition is only true once ensures that we don't keep greeting the user every time we evaluate their input. Nodes can also have children nodes, and there are situations in complex chatbots where employing this feature enables us to create a more nuanced chatbot. Children nodes are considered for execution only after the parent node has been executed, unless some other node in the dialog explicitly jumped to a given child node. Children nodes are then also executed top to bottom, and we stop executing at the first child node that meets the condition. Watson Assistant introduced many cool new features that actually allows us to rely less on children nodes, greatly simplifying our dialog design. By the end of this course, you'll become familiar with both children nodes and the simpler alternatives you can commonly use in many scenarios. To the fifth module of how to build chatbots. So far, we've created a basic but functioning chatbot. The problem is that it's currently available only from the Try It Out panel after you log in. If you wish to share it with some friends or actual end users, you are not able to, unless you give them your login information, something you should never do. What we need to do is deploy our chatbot somewhere publicly accessible. As you worked on the dialogue skill in the previous module, you might have noticed that alongside skills, there was a tab for assistants. An assistant is a chatbot, and it can have one or more skills within it. We developed a dialogue skill that allows the chatbot to understand and reply to the user. Now we'll need to create the actual assistant and link our dialogue skill to it. Doing so will allow our chatbot to be deployed through various channels, including WordPress sites, Facebook Messenger, Intercom, Slack, your own application, etc. Some coding skills are required for the more advanced deployments, such as your own web or mobile application. But thankfully, in this course, we'll deploy the chatbot without having to write any code. If you are a programmer, the API for Watson Assistant is well documented with examples in JavaScript and Python. When you create an assistant, you are given the option to enable a preview link. Doing so is a good idea as it gives you a page where anyone with your link can try out your chatbot. So it's a great way to let colleagues, friends, or even customer try out your chatbot on the web. This widget works by sending the user input to the Watson Assistant service you created, retrieving the response of your dialogue skill, and presenting it to the user. If your site is powered by the open source version of WordPress, you can greatly simplify the deployment of your chatbot thanks to a plugin that we developed. You install the plugin with one click, copy over the credentials from your assistant, and your chatbot will magically appear on your site. WordPress is incredibly popular and used by about a third of all sites on the web. Having the ability to deploy your chatbots on WordPress really simplifies the process of making your chatbot available to the public at large. The plugin is extremely convenient and flexible, allowing you to customize the look and feel of your chatbot window. It also includes many powerful features, such as the ability to limit the number of conversations that your chatbot can have, so that it doesn't exceed your free monthly allowance. You can also prevent abusive users from using up your quota by spamming your chatbot. Other cool features include the ability to escalate your request to a human, log your conversation, and more. It pays off to spend some time investigating the features once you install the plugin. In the labs for this module, you'll generate a test WordPress site, so you don't need to have a WordPress site of your own. Please note also that WordPress.com is a commercial offering of the open source WordPress software located at WordPress.org. As a result, they actually charge quite a bit to allow people to install plugins. So I don't recommend that you create a WordPress.com account and try to install our Watson Assistant plugin there. Instead, at least while you're learning, you should use the site that is provided to you in the labs. Once you generated the WordPress site, you'll be tasked with activating and configuring the plugin so that it can communicate with the assistant that you'll create. This assistant will in turn be linked to the dialogue skill you've been working on so far. Once the chatbot is deployed on your WordPress test site, you'll be able to make changes to the chatbot directly within Watson Assistant, and these changes and improvements will be automatically reflected in the chatbot that's deployed on your site. Sixth module of how to build chatbots. Now that you know the fundamentals of chatbot building and how to deploy your chatbot to a WordPress site, it is time to look at more advanced features. We'll do so in this and the next module of the course. In this module, we'll focus on two important concepts that can really take your chatbot to the next level, namely context variables and slots. Consider the following interaction. The user asks the chatbot about hours of operation for a specific location. The chatbot replies correctly. Then the user asks for the address of the store, and the chatbot replies with a generic list of all stores instead of the specific information. A human answering the same question would understand from the context that the user is asking about the location they already mentioned, but our current chatbot does not. The reason why this happens is that entities are captured and exist only during the current user input. There is no memory of them once the user enters new questions. So, even though the Toronto store was mentioned before, we have no recollection when the user asks us for its address. The only way this would work as expected would be if the user were to repeat Toronto again in their request for an address. Unfortunately, we can't control how people choose to phrase their questions, and it would be uncommon for the average user to repeat Toronto again when it's obvious from the context of the conversation. This is the problem that context variables allow us to solve. At any time in any node of our dialogue, we can store values we collected from the user for later use. Unlike entities, context variables remain available for the entire duration of the conversation with the user, so we can refer back to them at any time. We could, for example, store the location entity value in a city context variable in the node that handles hours of operation. Then, when we hit the location info node, we can look into the city context variable to see if a value has been set. If it has, we can use it to provide a specific address to the user. There are a few ways to set context variables, but one of the most convenient ways is using slots. We could, for example, add an optional slot to our node and check for a location entity. If one is found in the user input, the value will then be stored in the city context variable. It is optional because we don't force the user to give us a city. We simply assign it if one is provided. So when the user asks a generic hours of operation question without specifying a location, no context variable is set, and we can reply with a link to a page that includes all our locations and hours of operations. But if a location is specified, we store it in the city context variable through the slot, and then use it in our multiple responses within the same node to provide the specific hours of operation for the given location, in this case, Vancouver. We can make the slot required by adding a question that the chatbot will ask whenever no location is provided by the user. When the user asks, "What are your hours of operation?" without mentioning a city, our chatbot will then reply with, "For which city?" The slot will not give up asking the question until a valid answer is provided. Once the user provides the specific city, it will get stored in the context variable as usual, and the multiple responses in the node will handle the specific response for the city at hand. It's also worth noting that you can have multiple slots within the same node. In fact, this is the most valuable aspects of using slots. They are great at collecting information from the user, especially when multiple follow-up questions need to be asked. For example, consider the case of a restaurant chatbot's booking a reservation for a customer. The chatbot will ask how many guests and then store the number in an appropriate context variable. Then it might ask the date, then the time, and finally which name the reservation should be made under. Each of these questions is one slot within this hypothetical reservation node. Once the information has been collected and stored in the context, the restaurant will have access to the data needed to book the reservation in. This could be done manually by checking the logs, or through a bit of programming by making the node make a call to an API server to schedule the reservation in whatever table system the restaurant adopts. I wanted to give you a decent theoretical understanding of what problems context variables and slots solve. However, as it's often the case, the only way to truly master these concepts is for you to practice them. The labs in this module will get you to improve your chatbot by employing some of the techniques discussed here. 7th module of how to build chatbots. At this point, you should have a solid understanding of what context variables and slots bring to the table. There is still one problem we're facing that we don't have a solution for yet. Consider the following interaction. The user asks the chatbot for some flower recommendations. The slot will ask for what occasion. Instead of replying with an occasion, the user decides to ask about hours of operation. The slot will continue to pester the user, asking for the occasion and ignoring other questions from the user, even though technically the chatbot knows how to answer such questions. The problem is that required slots won't quit asking their question until an acceptable answer has been provided and stored in a context variable. One option we have to make the interaction less obnoxious is to configure the Not Found section of a slot. Found and Not Found sections allow us to specify what the slot will say to the end user when they reply with an acceptable answer and when they don't, respectively. Typically, you'll use the Found section to thank the user for answering your question, or just leave it blank as it is by default. More interestingly, however, we can use the Not Found section to make asking the same question again less awkward. In other words, we can soften the blow of ignoring their second question by apologizing for having to ask the question again. Here is a practical example of how configuring the Not Found section of a slot can make the interaction a little smoother. You'll notice that when the user asks us an unrelated question while the slot is asking for the specific occasion, we don't just repeat the question verbatim. In this case, we say something like, "Sorry to ask again, but what occasion would you like flower recommendations for?" It comes across as significantly more empathetic and less robotic, even though technically we are still asking the same question. This is an improvement, but wouldn't it be great to be able to answer the aside question we received from the user and then come back to the original question? That's what a human agent would do in most circumstances. It turns out this is possible thanks to digressions. We can allow a slot to jump to a different node after having asked the mandatory question, and we can specify that other nodes can return back to an originating slot after answering the user's aside question. Let's see a practical example of how this would work. When the user ignores our request for a specific occasion, asking our chatbot to provide store hours instead, digressions allow us to jump to the node that handles hours of operations. Since that node has a slot too, that slot will ask its own question about which city are the store hours for. Once the user replies with Toronto, the node will provide the information to the user and return to the original node where the slot will ask about the occasion once again. This is a workflow that works quite well and makes our chatbot come across as smarter and friendlier. In some instances, you might not want to return, but instead continue the conversation from the node you jumped to. With digressions, you'll have a chance to specify the desired behavior, including which slots can digress to other nodes, which nodes can accept digressions, and whether a return is required. It's a powerful and genuinely useful feature. So where exactly do we specify the found and not found text for a slot? And where do we configure digressions? The nitty-gritty details are, as you probably guessed, in the labs for this module. You'll get to play with these new features that will make our simple chatbot more useful and user-friendly. Keep in mind that these features are somewhat advanced. I know plenty of people who built great chatbots without understanding or relying on them. Still, having a precursory understanding of the advanced concepts presented in this and the previous module will really pay off once you start building your own chatbots, whether for yourself, your company, or paying clients. Congratulations on reaching the end of this course. I hope you enjoyed it. Above all, I hope that you feel more confident in your ability to create chatbots. By now, you should be much more familiar with chatbots and how to leverage Watson Assistant to create, test, deploy, and improve your chatbot without having to write any code. You might be wondering what's next, so let's review some possible next steps for you. First and foremost, if you haven't completed the course quizzes and exam, make sure you do so. Next, if you are taking this course as part of a learning path or specialization, you might consider other Watson-based courses that expand upon the fundamentals you mastered within this course. I also recommend that you check out and read the official Watson Assistant documentation. It has a wealth of knowledge and will allow you to learn about some finer points we couldn't cover in this course. I highly recommend it, in particular to programmers who took this course. The documentation covers some advanced features that will be available to those who have programming experience or are not afraid of giving it a shot. On that note, if you are a programmer, you may want to check out the IBM Code Patterns site, where you'll find sample code related to, among others, chatbots and artificial intelligence. Many of these patterns leverage Watson Assistant along with other Watson services to create smart and useful chatbots. One such service is actually available to everyone, even if you don't have programming skills. I'm talking about IBM Voice Agent with Watson, a plug-and-play service that connects to your Watson Assistant chatbot to make it available over the phone. Same chatbot, just over audio rather than text. This is something your business or your clients might find highly appealing, so it's worth checking out in the IBM Cloud catalog. In my experience as someone who also loves to learn online, courses like this are great at providing an overview of what's possible and how you might go about accomplishing a given task. I have given you the lay of the land, if you will. But you won't truly master these concepts unless you take the time to create something on your own. We humans tend to learn by doing. So use these videos as much as needed. Reference the Watson Assistant documentation as you see fit. Take a look at the code patterns examples. But try to come up with your own chatbot to polish and fine-tune your skills as a chatbot builder. If you have questions in the process of creating your own chatbot, feel free to pose them in the discussion forum for this course. Finally, I'd like to invite you to stay in touch. You can follow and interact with me on Twitter. My username is AC Angiano. Also, if you build something cool after taking the course, feel free to share it with me there. If you don't use Twitter or would like a more private setting, you can also email me at cangiano.ca.ibm.com to show me what you built. We are more than happy to feature people who make good use of our AI technology. So this could be your opportunity to have your project or company featured somewhere on the IBM site. I look forward to seeing what you'll build. All the best to you, and good luck.